Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Laurel and Fig. This is episode 3 of our podcast, and we are going to continue on with our birth stories today. So last episode, we talked about our miscarriages and then both of our first children's birth stories. And so this one, we're going to kind of finish the children's birth
the rest
stories.
of the children.
You have 2 to talk about today. I have 1. So we're definitely going to dive right in because it's probably still going to be a long podcast talking about all those. We do have a sponsor today. So we are sponsored by The Birth Hour. The Birth Hour is an amazing place where you can listen to birth stories. It's a great place to prepare for your own birth. Birth can go a lot of different ways, and hearing a variety of experiences helps you feel prepared. The Birth Hour is a podcast featuring a new birth story each episode, with over 450 episodes to date, and a new episode every Tuesday and Thursday. There is something for everyone. I definitely didn't know about it with the first at all, but with the second, I knew about it, and I had a couple long drives that I would drive to my sister's in St. Louis, which was like 5.5-hour drive.
Right, plenty of time to listen to it.
Yeah, and I would just devour all the birth stories, because there's so many different stories on the Birth Hour. There's, hospital births, unmedicated hospital births, there's home births, there's pre-eclampsia stories, there's C-section stories, there's literally everything.
And I think it's a good resource because, I think a lot of people don't realize how many different ways birth can go. We were talking before just about between us and our total of 5 kids between us, just how different each one's birth was. And so, I mean, you multiply that by thousands and thousands, right?
Stories.
Well, I'm thinking
nuts.
thousands and thousands of women, right?
Yeah.
Your birth could go any number of ways. So if you can learn even from 10, that's still a lot of experience that you wouldn't otherwise get.
Yeah, for sure. And I actually had a client who did both of her birth stories on the Birth Hour podcast. And she had a VBAC with her second, so it was really cool to hear the story and put it together with the pictures and such. So we will definitely put that in our show notes.
Yep.
For sure. And I also want to note that while we're talking about Charlie, my daughter, and then your son Lucas, we had photographers at those 2 births. Yep. So those births are blogged, and we will share those in the show notes too, so that you can kind of, while you're listening, you can see the pictures and kind of put it all together, which is kind of a cool thing.
Yeah, it's nice to see all the pieces come together.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so you are going to start with Lincoln.
So Lincoln is my second, and they are a little over 2 years apart from his older sister, Elena. Pregnancy was low-key, kind of a mess because we were trying to have a baby, and then we were like, maybe we should buy a house and move to a bigger space, because we were still living in a 1-bedroom apartment. And the goal was we'll move into a 2-bedroom apartment. And then we started looking at 2-bedroom apartments. They were super expensive. So we were like, JK, let's just invest in a house.
Right.
And then simultaneously, I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to go back to school, because that's a good idea, right? So then I started going back to school for finance. And so I was working full-time, buying a house, and going to school full-time. And I had a toddler at home, because I'm insane. And
oh my gosh.
So we were like, okay, if we're going to buy a house, if I'm going back to school, let's put this baby thing on hold. And then, what happens, right? 2 weeks later, I'm late, and I'm like, well, I'm betting I'm pregnant.
Yeah.
And so I took a test, sure enough. And I was like, okay, I guess, here we go. Good thing we bought a house. So all of that is going on. It's kind of chaos. And we're having some insurance changes happening, but we think according to my insurance rep and the person at the office, she's a patient
administrator.
Yeah, administrative person. She's kind of helps facilitate those things. She was like, yeah, we can use your secondary insurance, and we'll make it all work so you can still see the OB or the midwives you were seeing, because I was still seeing the midwives, because that was my preferred provider. That I had them with my first pregnancy. And then I go in for our ultrasound, where we're supposed to find out if we're having a boy or a girl, and they're like, just kidding, this isn't going to work. You don't get to have an ultrasound today.
Oh my gosh.
And you have to switch providers, and we're not going to cover anything if you continue to go the way you were doing. And so we had to switch everything up, had to go to an OB, which is not a bad thing. I just wasn't comfortable with it because I had always been with the midwives. And so I just didn't really click with her right off the bat. And I've made some choices for our family that don't necessarily follow the traditional doctor recommended path, after research and such. And so, like, there was some fear-mongering at my first appointment, like, well, I've seen moms and babies die from this, like, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, dude, I'm not going through my entire pregnancy like this. So I sent her, like, this come to Jesus letter where I was like, listen, I'm not doing this, more or less. So I'm going to read you my letter because I want you to know that, like, you can send these types of things to your doctors. You can have these conversations with your doctors. You can make these changes. And it's not mean, but it is very straightforward. And, like, I want you and any other women out there to feel empowered to be able to, like, to say these things and not be afraid. Right. So I said, I'm writing in regards to our conversation regarding the flu vaccine last Friday. After talking with you and spending the weekend researching, we have decided to stick with our original decision and pass on the flu vaccine for me and my family. That goes for during this pregnancy and on, at least until new data can be presented that makes us reconsider this choice. If that data comes, we will again weigh the pros and cons and do research to make a well-informed and reasonable decision for our family. Furthermore, I'd like to make clear other standard procedures that we choose not to take part in regarding prenatal care. No Tdap vaccine during pregnancy regarding the care of our unborn child. No Hep B vaccine in the hospital will be delayed until first appointment. No eye ointment, delayed cord clamping, kangaroo care. Depending on how birth goes, we may skip vitamin K, and circumcision is still being researched and discussed as we had a girl the first time and may have things to consider. Choices like these are not ones that we make lightly based on others' opinions, faulty data, or scare tactics. We spend a fair amount of time researching these topics and making the choices that we feel are best for our family. If you should find any of these items are sticking points for you or feel that we are not the best doctor-patient fit, please let me know and I will attempt to find a different provider. Respectfully, Alesha. So I sent this to her, and probably within 2-3 hours, she responded back and was like, I really appreciate you taking the time to write this to me. I think we can make this work, especially now I know exactly where you're coming from, like what your rules are, your boundaries, your ideals are. And from that point forward, it was a lot better. It wasn't my perfect scenario because I just wasn't a huge fan of the team and we didn't click on a personal level, but I really did feel like she understood like what my needs were after that, and we were able to move forward a lot better. So there was a lot of pressure to induce, and I think I wasn't used to it because the midwives are a lot more gentler. Like, they don't really push you into a lot of stuff, or at least my midwives didn't. And so I ended up printing a mantra and like putting it on the back of my phone because I had so much anxiety about this pregnancy and like the baby coming early, and I had so many other things on my plate. And so the mantra more or less on the back of my phone was like, you are in charge of your own body. This is your baby. You can change doctors. Like, they do not get to take the final say. And I had it literally taped to the back of my phone, and I would like read it anytime I started to feel overwhelmed. And I say this because if you are in a situation similar to that, like, those little things really helped me, and I hope that like maybe that idea might be able to help you, to remind you that like you are in charge of your birth, you are in charge of your body, you are in charge of your baby. Like, you get to make the final choices. Your doctor may not agree, but there are always going to be other doctors you can work with or second opinions that you can get. And I want people to feel comfortable being able to do that, because at the end of the day, your doctor works for you, and if you don't get along with them, you don't like them, you can always fire them.
Right.
So,
exactly. And it doesn't matter how far pregnant you are. It really doesn't.
I was over 20 weeks the first time, and then with my second baby, there was a slightly similar issue, and I was like 30 weeks. Like, I will just switch. Like, I'm not doing it.
Exactly. And you don't have to be stuck just because you are pregnant and they've been seeing you. That's fine. You can find someone that works better for you.
Absolutely.
I know the midwives in Madison at the hospitals, all you have to do is see them one time before you give birth. So literally you could go in at 39 weeks and see them one time, and they will be your midwife at your birth. So it really, like, please just find someone that works.
I mean, the longer you wait,
well,
I think like there are more doctors who get hesitant about like jumping on late in the game. But like she said, there are people who will take you after they've met you once, and you have that choice, and they're like, that opportunity is there for you.
Well, and when you think of it too, I mean, how many times when you have an OB, is it actually your OB giving? Like,
who actually delivers, right? Because a lot of time they're like on rotating teams and such.
And it's the same with the midwives, at least like here in Madison that work at the hospital, is they're kind of on a team too, and so they're rotating out. But you usually see all of them,
right? At least once throughout the course of your pregnancy, or at an open house or something.
Right.
Yeah.
So you may not get the same person that you've been with this whole time, but they can help you make the right choices, and you're educating yourself, which is the most important thing.
Absolutely. So finally I ended up being induced because I had urine in my protein and I had elevated blood pressure. So there was this thought that like it could turn into pre-eclampsia. And so we had held off quite a while. We made it to 38 and 4 before we actually had to induce.
Yeah.
And I was really adamant about making it at least past 37. Like that was like my one point because I know like a lot of lung development happens around that stage. So like I found my point and like once we got to 38 and 4 and she was like, hey, I'm getting kind of nervous. I was like, okay, like we can, like I feel comfortable with this. Like we've talked about it. So we went ahead and induced. And I didn't have preeclampsia at the time. I said that, and I didn't develop it like at any time during it. So it was just that like hypertension that they were slightly worried about. And I think I kind of touched last time that I had some anxiety going in because I had hemorrhaged the first time, and the second time, you know, I had even talked to my doctor ahead of time, and I was like, "What's the game plan? Like, what's going to happen if I hemorrhage?" And so her and I had talked about it, as well as once I got there, I talked to some of the nurses I had about it. Like I talked to everybody about it because I wanted everybody to know, and like I wanted us all to be on the same page. And she was like, nope, if you hemorrhage, like I'm going to give you your Pitocin right in your thigh, and like literally walked me through it. But I'm the person who wants to know, like, okay, what shots am I getting? Where is it going? Like, what are the steps? Because I need that information. And I know for some people that is overwhelming, but I think there is still a way to have that conversation and that communication without overwhelming yourself. So we ended up doing the Pitocin, and then Pitocin always causes me to have terrible back labor. And so then I did go ahead and get an epidural. This epidural was not placed as well as my first one. It wasn't terrible, but it just like, it wasn't quite even. So if I rotated too far left or right, like just the one side would be numb.
Yep.
But it still did enough for like the back labor that I was able to get through things. And once things like kicked into gear with him, like we were gone. Like we were off to the races. Like,
ready.
Yeah. And when she checked me and she was like, oh, you're 10, it was 11 minutes.
Whoa.
Like, I think I pushed twice. I think.
Second baby.
Right? And he was like, boom, there. And I was like, oh, that's it? Like, we done?
Bam.
And it was so interesting, like the difference in like recovery too, because like I didn't tear at all. I didn't have any hemorrhaging. Like there was no complications after he was like born. Like there's no postpartum complications. And so I remember waking up the next morning because he was born at like 7 p.m., like a little later in the day. And so, you know, we ate, rested, whatever. And the next morning I got up, like my epidural was totally off. Like I could walk around and I was like, I'm going to jump in the shower. And I felt like a brand new person.
Right.
Like I was like, I told my husband, I was like, I could go like run a marathon right now. Is this what people normally feel like after they've given birth to a baby and they haven't hemorrhaged? Because that's the only experience I had.
Right.
Because with my daughter, when I hemorrhaged,
you lost so much blood.
Yeah.
So
and
I
couldn't get out of bed. They had me like on a catheter for 2 days, and like I couldn't get out of the bed. I couldn't shower. But with my second birth, like I literally like up the next morning, took a shower, felt like a brand new person. I was like, I'm gonna go walk around the floor, check things out. I felt so good.
Oh my gosh.
And it was like, it just like blew my mind, like how different recovery could be between, like I kind of thought that my first recovery, even though I hemorrhaged and I knew like everyone didn't hemorrhage, like I just kind of thought that exhaustion was just like normal. Like I thought that's how
when
people
you
felt.
lose that much blood, like, oh my gosh,
My mind was
everything
blown.
is messed up.
It was insane.
Yeah.
And it was so much better because like before his birth, like I had gone to La Leche League and I had already met my leaders, and I already had like, you know, talked to other moms I knew because I wasn't like a first time mom. So I had a couple mom friends here and there. And it was just so much better. I was so much more confident going into it the second time because I was like, okay, like I've been through this. Like I got this. I can do this. And even though like his pregnancy and stuff had challenges, at the end of it, it was so much better because I felt so much more prepared because I had learned so much through the first time.
Yep.
And I felt so much more like I had people in my corner and like I had these resources I could reach out to if I had needed it, that I was so much more confident.
And you
like,
found all these resources like the La Leche League, everything before you gave birth. Which is, again, so key. We talk about this a lot on the podcast, but finding those resources and those things that you wanna do in postpartum before you give birth is so important.
And I'd already been to a meeting, so I already knew their faces. I knew where they met. Like they knew me, and it was like a little weird to show up without a baby the first time. And I just explained to them like, hey, like breastfeeding sucked last time. Like it didn't go well, and so like I just want to get to know you. I want you to get to know me. I want to feel comfortable so that like when there is an issue, like I can come. And I did. Right. I mean, like right after he was born, he was like a week old, and like we were still doing like syringe feeding and like trying to make things work because his breastfeeding journey was a little complicated, and we made it through and made it on to like 16 months.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, like, it was kind of tough, but I felt comfortable and I knew them and I knew that support was there. So I could go to a meeting and comfortably syringe feed him and then like switch him to breast, like,
that's amazing.
you know, all during a meeting. Cause I was like, oh, these people know me. Like, this is fine.
And you know what? You're exposing them to different things too.
Different feeding styles too. Yeah. Cause it, again, never knew like syringe feeding was like really a thing because we talked about this the first time, that the first time you have a baby, sometimes you think like breastfeeding is just this natural thing. It's just going to click into place and like, it's just going to go great. But like I've attempted to breastfeed 3 times, only successfully like made it through twice.
Yeah.
But even both my boys, like their breastfeeding journeys were very different. I mean, my youngest was a NICU baby, so that threw its own challenges in. And like, I know there are women who have flat nipples or inverted nipples or babies with tongue ties and lip ties. And, you know, there's just so much that goes into it. So if you can have that resource ahead of time, it's just a huge game changer for you.
I'm realizing as you were just talking about like how postpartum was so different with Lincoln, that I missed a huge part in Sam's story. And so I'm going to have to talk about that during Charlie's.
I'm going to have to go back.
That, are you all set with Lincoln's?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. So just real quick, let's talk about this. This is going to get real TMI, but it's like so ridiculous. So if you remember in the last podcast, I talked about Sam's birth and how I had a botched epidural and all this stuff, right? And so the second night we were in the hospital, I felt like I had to go to the bathroom, number 2, right? And back up just real quick. My doctor kept telling me to take Miralax for like months before I gave birth. And I was like, no, I'm fine. I mean, I'm a little constipated, but like, it's fine. It's not a big deal.
I know where the story's going. It just clicked.
I should have taken it. If your doctor tells you to take Miralax, please do it. Because, oh my God. I thought in the hospital, I was like, I'm in a safe place. I'm going to try to poop here. My first baby, postpartum poops are really scary. And so I was like, I'm gonna do this. I sat there for like 2 hours.
Oh, and take the stool softener. When the nurse gives you a stool softener, take it. Don't be like, no, I don't need that. Just take it.
And take that damn ibuprofen. Because
it's not gonna hurt you, I swear.
Take it. So yeah, I sat there. My legs went numb. And I could not get this poop out, this poor poop. And so I was like, I was a mess, okay? Let me just tell you, I was literally laboring a poop baby. For like 6 hours, guys.
Dang, girl.
I just had a 40-hour labor with my baby. And now I was telling my husband, I was like, I'm giving birth again.
You're like sweating.
This is I was literally in the shower, holding on to the sides, like trying to get this poop out. It was ridiculous. Okay. Sean said I scarred a nurse trying to like tell her to just get it out of me. He's like, she came out white. Like, I don't think she's ever tried to pull a poop out of someone before. I finally got not an enema, but like, you know, the suppository or whatever. And I was finally able to poop. And my husband like runs in and he's like, oh my God, this is like the size of my shoe. Let me tell you, my husband has like size 13 and a half shoe. It was nuts. And like, I couldn't take care of my baby for that whole night. It was during the night.
Well, you're so uncomfortable.
Yeah, it was during the night. It was so ridiculous. And Sean was like taking care of it. I couldn't breastfeed. I couldn't even lay down. I was in so much pain. And then like literally the next day we went home. It was just ridiculous. Like, so ridiculous. So
I will say though, like I never experienced that. Like my first bowel movement after all of my kids was super easy. And I know that is not true for everybody, but just as like poop babies are not true for everybody.
Right. I seriously was so constipated though.
But nobody talks about that your first poop could go either way. Like it could be terrible,
very scary,
or it could be nothing. Totally and so I think like knowing that like, hey, I should just be mentally prepared for this going either way. Right. And like knowing that like, hey, I really should take this stool softener.
I also had 4 tears. Yeah. So that was very frightening.
So like sensitive now.
Please don't break open.
The other way.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, that was my first experience, guys. My second, much different. One, I took a probiotic the entire pregnancy.
Game changer.
And I took the Calm, it's called. It's like that stuff that you put in your drink, magnesium. Because one, I had restless legs and that helps with that. And two, I took it like every other day or like every 2 days just to keep things regular because I was determined not to have a poop baby.
Not to have issues.
Okay, now we're going into Charlie's birth. Here we go.
Keep tracking.
Okay, so if you remember from last time, I had hyperemesis really bad with my first pregnancy, and I was determined to not have that again. I was like, I'm going to get in the best shape of my life. I ate really healthy. I worked out. I was like 150 pounds, like, which is, super fit for me. Like, it was awesome. But I was still terrified to get pregnant again.
Yeah.
I remember, Sean, in the summer, we were starting to talk about it. Sam was like 15, 16 months or something. And he's like, well, I want to start trying in the next couple of months because he wanted our kids to be close together.
Yeah.
And I was like, no,
maybe not.
Maybe not. I don't know. I think I'm just going to keep working out. It'll be fine. But I also had this like huge goal with working out was like even my hashtags when I was working out was like, for this baby. Like I wanted to be fit. And I didn't want to get pregnant again. I was so scared to get pregnant. And I remember I had a home birth that I went to. And it was just the most amazing home birth that I documented. And I fell in love with home births for sure. And you know who I'm talking about. It was just amazing. But what was really cool about the birth was that she hemorrhaged in it. And the midwife was so calm and knowledgeable. Like she gave her the shot of Pitocin in the leg, just like you got in the hospital. She rigged up like a bag of fluids to the curtain rod. Like it was awesome. And she was totally great. So I started talking about home birth a lot to Sean because I really wanted to have a home birth, but he wasn't like 100% on board. But he also was totally like, this is your birth. And if you want to do this, that's what we'll do. But he was also still like, maybe we should go to the hospital.
There's hospitals for a reason.
Yeah. So as I started to be more like, I'm not sure I want to get pregnant, he dangled that carrot in front of me. He was like, okay, if we can get pregnant, we can have your home birth. And I was like, Done. Let's do it. Of course, we got pregnant the first try. And
Fertile Myrtle.
Yeah. And I quickly realized, like, shit, I'm pregnant again. I'm so sick. It came on so much faster, this pregnancy.
I think when did I take you to the hospital?
Yeah.
That like 4 or 5 weeks?
7 weeks.
7 weeks? It was early.
Yeah. So I found out I was pregnant 4 weeks, right? 5 weeks. I get like week-long migraines. That's like the first thing I'm pregnant. And then I started throwing up right away. So at 7 weeks, I'm already extremely dehydrated. I mean, people aren't even finding out they're pregnant until like then. Like that's ridiculous. I was so dehydrated that I text you and it was like 9:00 at night and I'm like, hey, I'm gonna drive myself to the hospital.
And I was like, no ma'am.
Yeah. I was like, I need to get fluids. And you're like, well, why isn't Sean bringing you? And I was like, well, I mean, it's 9:00 at night. Sam has to go to bed. We don't have a babysitter. It's fine. And she's like, I'll be there in 10 minutes. You literally like didn't even give me a choice. You're just like, I will be there in 10 minutes. You're an amazing friend.
I try.
So she showed up. I get in the car. We go to the hospital. Party.
I was in the ER.
Oh, yeah. So we were in the ER. They gave me fluids and Zolfran through the IV, which is like wonderful. We have a picture. We should share that. Picture of me sitting there like, yay, I'm getting fluids. And of course they confirmed that I had hyperemesis again.
Surprise.
Yeah, so I was so surprised. And I do want to say, too, with this second pregnancy, going into it, I did a lot of research in case that I did have hyperemesis. And so I tried a lot of different things before that 7 weeks, to try not to take Zolfran. I do want to say that I did try different things before the Zolfran this time because I don't know, I just wanted to do all of the things. So I tried the Unisum and B6, that whole thing. It did nothing for me.
Didn't touch it.
I tried taking different probiotics. I looked up so many different things to try. And again, by 7 weeks, I was already so bad that I was so dehydrated. And I was also really, really fit too. So I didn't really have much weight to lose then.
Yeah. And your son was still nursing at the time, right?
Yes. So that's about the time when I had to stop nursing him. He was 22 months. I really wanted to make it to 2 years. So I was just shy of that. But I couldn't afford to give him my calories. I wasn't keeping any in myself.
Right.
So yeah, we ended up going to the ER. And remember, I was like hungry for the first time in weeks. So
I was like, yeah, where do you want to go? Anywhere you want.
Let's go get food. It was probably like midnight at this point.
It was late.
So the only thing that was open...
Perkins.
And we sat down. That was such a trip. Oh my gosh. We got our food. I was so excited to eat. And then in the next booth over, a guy starts having a seizure. And... obviously, it wasn't his fault.
Right. You can't control those things. Like, my mother-in-law has epilepsy. Like, it just happens at the most inconvenient times.
Right. And the noises he was making was like gagging, gargling, like puking noises. Yeah. And so it just triggered me. And I remember just looking at you, and we both were like, check.
I guess we'll just take this home.
We just boxed up our food, and I did not eat any more of that.
Nope, that was done.
I think I had like one bite, literally.
You were excited about your hash browns.
I was so excited about those hash browns and ketchup. But I can't eat red things when I'm pregnant. It's weird. Pizza sauce, ketchup. I mean, it makes me throw up. Yeah, that's true. My mom always said she couldn't eat purple things.
How many purple foods are there?
I know. I really don't know.
Blueberries?
She likes
Eggplant?
radishes and stuff and all those things. Yeah. Beets. Anyways. But so I was obviously very sick, and I found out later that hyperemesis gets worse each pregnancy you have. So it really didn't matter how much work I did. I was going to be sick. And it was hard. It was very hard having hyperemesis with a toddler because I remember like laying in bed one time, and I can hear my son wanting me and crying for me, and I didn't have the energy to get up. It was very, very hard, and I got very depressed.
Because Nicole and I didn't meet until I had my second son. He was like 4 months old. Yep. So Nicole only has one child at this point. So we were pretty good friends before you get pregnant with Charlie.
Right.
And I can remember like she's so sick and she's struggling so much that like she's pulled back from like everybody. And like I didn't know what to do. Like I didn't know how to like support her as a friend. Like because I knew she was sick. So my go-to comfort tactic is like, here, do you want me to bring you some food?
Right.
That's not working in this situation. Yeah. And so, like, I mean, I do remember, though, like, how hard that was for you mentally. Like, it wasn't just a physical thing for you.
It was a mental game for sure. And, I mean, I want to talk about this, and I will talk about it more in the mental health during pregnancy and things like that, too. So we'll talk about this a few times. But saying it out loud is always hard. Yeah. But I do remember sitting in bed one day and just thinking, I will be okay if I lose this baby. I'll be okay if I have a miscarriage. That'll be fine because I won't be sick anymore, and I can take care of my other child, and I'll just have one child, and I will be totally fine with that. Obviously, I wouldn't be fine.
Right.
Obviously, I've had a miscarriage, and it is awful and traumatic, and I would not have been okay. And I also would have tried again because I wanted 2 children. But that's how bad it was for me. As a mom who has went through loss, to almost wish that to happen.
To be like, it will be okay, and like it won't be okay.
You know in your head it wouldn't. Like it seems like such an illogical. But
like, when you're in those places, when you're in those holes, like those are the thoughts that consume you.
Those are the thoughts, and that's what I thought of nonstop for like the first trimester. And I lost 25 pounds in the first trimester, and again I did not have it to lose.
No,
so I was like. Just a mess. Seriously, I actually, so to back up, we knew we wanted to have a home birth before we even got pregnant. And so when we got pregnant, I literally interviewed midwives at 4 weeks. And this is why, because I knew I would be sick. Right. And I wanted them to meet me as me.
Right. Pre-sick, like
Yes.
being sucked down into that. Yeah.
Right. And I wanted to be able to ask the questions and stuff, and I wanted to like really be involved in the interviewing process. So I had 2 interviews set up. I specifically wanted a CNM, which is like a certified nurse midwife, because they can administer, the IVs and things like that, and they're just more trained. And I had 2 set up, and I had already worked with one at a home birth before, so I had the other one as my first interview, and I went to it, and I fell in love with her immediately. I was like, she's the one. I know she's it. So I just canceled my other interview and ended up going with her. But I booked her so early because I knew I was going to be so sick. It did suck having to go through my regular doctor that I had with Sam, because I was still using her with to get Zolfran. And I remember going to her and I'm like, look, I am going through the midwife, but she can't prescribe me Zolfran. I am dying here. I need Zolfran. And she made the whole appointment, she made me feel so bad about using a midwife and was just bashing it the whole time. And I'm just like, just give me the Zolfran so I can get out of here. Like, I'm so done with you. So I ended up getting the Zolfran, thankfully. And I started to feel a little bit better. Around like 11 weeks, it was Christmas. And I remember because my family didn't ever see me super sick with Sam, like that sick, and they thought I was just like extreme sick, whatever. But to see me in this first trimester with Charlie was like eye-opening to them, because it was Christmas and all I could do was lay in bed. I think I came out and laid on the couch while we opened presents at each house. Otherwise, I was in bed. And I remember my mom coming in by me and she's like, if you just get up and have some pizza and walk around, you'll be fine. And she kept bothering me to the point that I was like, fine. Want to watch me throw up? Sure. So I did. Pizza. I got up and had a piece of pizza and immediately was throwing up all my food and even more sick, So she started to understand, okay, this is not normal morning sickness, right?
And I think it is like well-meaning. Yeah. But like if you've never been through it, like you don't get it.
Well, and they just really thought that I was just kind of playing
exaggerating it.
Yeah. And so my dad, he was like, this is really worrisome. And I'm like, I could literally die. My baby could die. Like, hyperemesis is not like just some, you're being a whiner kind of thing. I was so sick and I started, so you can take Zolfran every 6 hours. And I started taking it literally every 6 hours. Because it wears off at like 5 hours. So I would set an alarm in the middle of the night to be able to get up and take it, because that was the only way I could not be as sick when I woke up. And I started to realize that, and then I started to feel a little bit better and a little more human, but I'm still super sick. And I'm not sure if I talked about this with the last one, but like, did I talk about showering?
No.
How it was so hard to shower.
No.
So with like hyperemesis, I'm just vomiting constantly. I have no energy. Yeah, I literally threw up every single thing I ate or drank. And my midwife was like, drink small sips every 15 minutes, just try to keep fluids down. But it didn't work. So, but like showering, after a few days, I'd be like, okay, I need to take a shower. But I didn't have the energy or strength to wash my hair. So I would literally just lay in the bottom of the tub.
We've talked about this,
Yeah, and just like watch the water roll around. Like, it was so pathetic and
hope
sad.
that like that was going to be good enough to get you semi-decently clean.
Yeah, and so Christmas morning, I literally was like, I took my first shower in like 12 weeks, and I was like, I showered for y'all.
Right, like for a real shower.
Merry Christmas.
You're welcome.
I didn't comb my hair or do anything with it. It was still just wet, slicked back, but I showered. Oh my gosh. So anyways, her pregnancy it was hard. It was definitely hard. I whined a lot to my midwife, and she was so amazing and always like listening to me. But my experience, I'm talking a lot about the pregnancy here, but it was just so different from Sam's pregnancy because of my midwife. Like, I would arrive at her house, and it's like this little yellow Norwegian house in the middle of like all these white houses. Right. And she would greet me at the door with a hug, and her little dogs would be running around, and like I would grab some tea, and we would sit down in her office, and we would talk for an hour. The entire hour was for me. I was never rushed. If I wanted to talk about whatever I wanted to talk about, that's what we talked about. And it was just, I felt so seen and heard compared to my last pregnancy, where my doctor was like half out the door whenever I wanted to ask a question, or I sat there for 45 minutes waiting for her, I grew such such a tight relationship with my midwife, and she was training a midwife. So I just I loved them so much. They were I couldn't wait to go see them. And it was funny, towards the end of my pregnancy, I started craving food again. Ooh. And so I was all about tacos. But my husband got really sick of making me tacos. So
I feel like you ate a lot of fish tacos.
I ate so many tacos.
I feel like you would send me pictures.
Right.
To be like, look, I'm eating.
Well, so my midwife appointment was right next to a Qdoba. So I started going by myself because it was during Sam's nap time, and then I would go get Qdoba. And my husband's like, you need to stop eating out so much. And I'm like, shut up.
I'm eating, okay.
Right? I can eat this, so I'm going to. But anyways, fast forward. I'm not sure there's much more I need to talk about with pregnancy, and we can always talk more
let's
about
come back to something.
I'm sure we'll do a podcast on hyperemesis because there's so much to talk about. But my labor with Charlie, it was interesting because I was 38 weeks and I was done. I'm still throwing up every single day.
Right, it never really went away.
No, it never went away. The Zolfran doesn't stop you vomiting, it just helps with the nausea. Mm-hmm. So I was able to function and take care of my child and stuff without just laying around all the time.
Right.
And it's weird too because I get triggered by there's this one game on Sam's iPad that he played all the time when I was sick, mm-hmm. and when he plays it now, I'm like, oh. I want to
automatically you feel that.
I literally want to throw up. I hate it. But I actually did nipple stimulation in the shower because I was like, get this baby out of me. I'm done. I'm 38 weeks. Perfect.
She's good enough.
Yeah. I feel a little bad about that. Maybe a little.
Could be worse.
I was so sick, and I was just I can't do this anymore. And that night I was reading Sam a book, and I felt this weird gush of water. And I wouldn't say it was a pop.
Yeah.
Because I never had that. I never had a pop of water. But it was a gush, and I remember getting up as fast as a hugely pregnant lady can get out of bed and rushing to the bathroom, and I was like, Sean, I think my water's breaking. He's like, oh my God, should we call everyone? Because we were also having a home birth with our two midwives. Mm-hmm. I had it set up to have a photographer, but she's a sister, so two photographers because they're a sister thing. And then I was having my mom and Sean's mom. Sean and I are high school sweethearts, so his mom is my mom too. Right. So I wanted them both to be there, and I wanted them to know what a home birth was all about and to experience that, especially since my line of work is so much integrated with that. Yeah. And so he's like, we have to call the moms because they're half hour, 3.5 hours away. And I was like, well, just chill out. I don't know if this is my bloody show or mucus blood. I don't know.
I don't know what this is.
There's so many things that could be coming out of me right now. I don't know. And so I text my midwife, and she's like, go to bed.
Go to sleep.
It was late. She was like, go to bed, go to sleep, message me if anything changes. So I did. I was able to sleep. And I say sleep with quotations because when I'm pregnant, I literally have to rotate every half hour because my hips hurt so bad. So I have to rotate. And then if I'm going to rotate and do all that work to move all the pillows, I may as well pee.
Right, because you're up anyway.
Then you got to get up to pee. So my water was slowly trickling.
It's slowly.
Which made it just hard to sleep because I felt gross. I'm like, this is weird. I feel like I'm peeing the bed.
Constantly.
So it was 7 a.m, and I had a contraction, and I was like,
ooh, here we go.
So of course I call my midwife, and I call everyone, the moms and the photographers, and my midwife again was like, okay, it's 7 a.m, they're not really super strong, so why don't you go back to sleep, right?
Go back.
All about the sleep. So I was like, okay, I'll go back to sleep, and I did. I woke up at 10, I want to say, with the boys, and my midwife told me, she's like, things will probably slow down once Sam wakes up, which they did. We had breakfast and stuff, and there was nothing, and I was like, nope, this is happening today. I'm done. So we went for a huge walk along our block, and I had been walking super pregnant for 2 or 3 months on this strip.
Yeah.
So at this point, people probably know I'm in labor because I'm so huge, and I have to stop every 6 minutes or something,
right.
you know? And I also learned something with this labor was that I have really inconsistent contractions. Mm-hmm. I had it with Sam too, and they were trying to control it with Pitocin, and they just wanted me to be so every 3 minutes, you know?
But not everybody is like that. And I think it's important to hear that.
Right.
I mean, just as a reminder, your body is not going to do, not always. I mean, some people certainly fall into that category, but your body does not always follow, the standard, of what they expect it to be. Like if it's 3 minutes or if it's, your certain order of things that are supposed to happen. I mean, some bodies just do what they want.
Right, exactly. And that's what I learned during this labor was I was having the 6 minutes apart, 3 minutes apart, 2 minutes apart, 1 minute apart, 7 minutes apart. Like they were just all over the place. And I was like, this is exactly how Sam's was, but I wasn't just allowed to labor. Right. I was like given all these different drugs and stuff to like make it be like everyone else.
Make it fit the mold.
Yeah. So it was very relaxing. We were just at home. It was just me and my husband and my son. We just lounged around on the ball and bounced and stuff and just like hung out as a family, which was really nice. We just watched TV and it was so chill. And then it started to like pick up a little bit. So we told the moms, come down, because they had a pretty long drive, and they arrived at like 5 p.m. And that's when things started to pick up. And I knew them arriving would probably make things stop a little bit. So for them to keep going so intensely, I was like, okay, this is it. So I called my midwife and she's like, okay, well, I want you to go lay down on your side, because that'll kind of tell me if, things are really intense and I need to come, or if they're going to like pitter away and you can rest. And I had just done that because she told me to do that. And I was like, no.
Nope.
Laying down hurts so bad. I don't want to do that again. And so she's like, okay, well, how about I come and I'll help you and then I'll be there. And I was like, okay, fine. Not understanding what I was about to be put into. So she gets there. And I mean, she monitored me for like a half hour. They did all the blood pressure. They brought in all the stuff, the birth pool, everything. And then, she was like, I want to get you to this position she calls the mountain climber.
Sounds terrible.
I should also say that when I'm in labor, I tense up a lot. I mean, most people do, right? Like when you're in pain, you're like curling into a ball. So I was literally holding on to a pillow and I was kneeling and holding on to the end of the couch. So I was like very, very tense.
Right.
And so that's why she was like, I want you to do this. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about this because it was the worst. Oh my gosh. And I've done births with her since, and I see her do this and I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. But it works. It works. It really does. So it's basically this thing where I couldn't clench anymore because I was like this arm was behind me and this arm was ahead of me and then this leg was behind me. So I was like this, basically. And I could not clench. Right. I had to just surrender.
Were you laying on the floor?
I was laying on the bed.
Or on a bed, yeah.
Yep. So I had like my pillow propped up on one leg and stuff, and my belly was to the side. But I couldn't even like hold something because my arms were behind me. Yeah. And my one leg was outside. There's this picture of like my toe that I was like, clenching it because I couldn't.
That's all you can do is like curl your toes.
Anything. Yeah. I think I held on to Sean's hand really tight. But I just had to surrender, and that's what I needed. I needed my body to open up, but fuck, it hurt. Oh my gosh, and then I'm like going through transition in this spot, and it was just horrendous. But it went really fast then. It started to really, really pick up. And at this point, I told myself during Charlie's birth, I was like, I'm not going to say I can't do this because obviously I'm going to do this. I know I'm going to do this. So I told myself I wouldn't say that, but I did say to my mom, I think I'm going to die.
But you didn't say I can't do this.
But I didn't say I couldn't do this, just that I might die because it's just like so intense.
Well, and you didn't have any like drugs or like painkillers and stuff on board.
Yep. And that was a huge reason why I picked a home birth because of my botched epidural with Sam. And I just didn't want to be tempted because when you get to that place, you're like, just give it to me.
Just do it.
I don't even care that I have damage. Just damage it all. Paralyze me for sure.
Sure, it's fine. Just slice my spine in half. I don't care.
So I really prepared myself mentally for what I was about to go through. I've seen so many women go through it in my job, so I was like, I can do this. And I totally was in it. And it was really interesting because I remember being in a contraction thinking, I want to hold on to how this feels so badly so I can help my clients get through it, because even when you're like standing next to them, you're like, oh, this probably really hurts, but you're
not really there.
Yeah. The pressure that is like on your body, it feels like you're going to explode. Yeah. It really does. It's intense. And so The best thing I could put it towards to like explain it to people is, you know, when your like foot falls asleep and you're like, don't move it, don't move it, don't move it, it hurts, you know. Yeah. It's like that times a billion. Right, times a billion. It's like, don't touch me, don't touch me. I don't like to be touched during labor. I like to be like, hand on me, but don't like rub or like move me. Like hold still, you know. So Sean was there, he was like holding me and stuff, and my moms were both there, and it was amazing, and Sam was chattering around, playing with stuff. He didn't even notice. And I do want to talk about that too, because I wanted him to be at the birth for sure. And I told, this birth story is going to be forever long. I'm sorry. I wanted him to be there, and Sean was like, we're going to scar this kid and he's going to need like trauma. Like he's going to need therapy. And I'm like, no. And my midwife even said, she's like, if you don't like relay it as a scary thing, he's gonna have no idea. He doesn't pick up on it. Yeah. So we watched a lot of birth stories, me and him, and I told him how I'm gonna like roar, you know, like do all this stuff. So he didn't even notice. Like, barely even bat an eye. Yeah. And so all of a sudden I start to feel like grunty, like pushy, right? And I like my birth worker brain was like, oh gosh, that's it. That was involuntary. I've never had that before because I had an epidural with the first one. So I felt that, and I immediately told Sean, I was like, go get Ingrid. I think I'm getting ready to push. Yeah. And so she did, and I hadn't been checked this entire pregnancy because I was checked so many times with Sam, and it was like so disheartening to be like, oh, you're still a 3. And it just killed the vibe. So I was like, I don't want to be checked at all. And so this was the first time she was like, can I check you just to make sure you're 10 so that you're not pushing on anything? So she checked me and she's like, you're a 9 and you only have like a tiny lip and that's it. And I was like, okay, oh my gosh. So Sean looked at each other. We looked at each other and we're like, a 9? That's like, awesome. That's insane after Sam's labor. You know, this was incredible. And so she's like, I gotta fill up the birth pool. Right? So I'm trying not to push. And
wait, the birth pool's not filled up yet?
No, because they had it like a fourth or a third of the way full, and we ran out of hot water. Oh, man. And so my mother-in-law is boiling water in all of her little saucepans on the stove, and she's like pouring it in. So I finally get in, and I was able to like hold on to the side, right? Yeah. I'm like, not being in that mountain climber position anymore. And my midwife's like, you got to sit back. Because your lip is in the front and you need like the baby to push on it, you know? So I had to like sit back and hold on to the handles, and my mother-in-law is pouring hot water in between my legs, like, be careful. And I'm like, I'm not moving. Where am I going to go? Where am I going to go? It's fine. And so I had to get through a couple of like pushes where like waiting for that, you know, to all melt away. And then I remember like her head starting to come out, and I always wanted to like touch her head. And so I went down, and everyone like pulled my hands away, and they're like, oh my gosh, she's not out all the way. Don't pull her head. And I'm like, fuck, I know she's not out all the way. Trust me. She is still inside of me, and I can feel every single fiber of her. Like, I know. But I was also in shock, so I was just like, okay. So I one more push, and she started coming out, and I always told my midwife I wanted to catch her if it was in the water. If I wasn't able to be in the water, then they're very slippery and I would be too scared. But in the water, I mean, my hands are wet anyways, and it's fine. And so I was able to reach down and like pick her up, and it was just the most like healing moment of my life. Right. You know, like everything I worked for throughout that whole pregnancy and after Sam, like, there it was. There it was, right there. And I was holding her to my chest, and her cord was like this gorgeous spiral cord that I've always wanted to see. And I'm like, you got to capture a home birth and a spiral cord to these photographers that are never going to do a home birth again. Right. And I was like, this is amazing. So I remember right before I pushed her out, Sam was like chattering in my ear, and I'm like, shut up.
Because you're so focused, you're so in the zone. The last thing you need is like toddler chatter.
Right, and I always envisioned him like being in the pool swimming with me. And he wanted to be in that pool, but there just wasn't enough room. No. Like I was about to shoot a baby. Like bam. So obviously baby comes out and goes to Sean, and she like latched on his nipple right. It's hilarious. And I got out, and the placenta came out and everything. I didn't have any extra bleeding. I really didn't have any stitches needed, which was incredible compared to my first. And I really think a lot of that was my midwife. She was like making me do slow pushes and telling me to do horse lips, which is like, you know, to like not push so hard. And so it was just incredible to know, like, I remember sitting on the toilet after I had Charlie, and the way our bedroom is that like the toilet and then the door is to our bed. Yeah. And so Sean was sitting on the bed like right across from me, and he was just in shock. And he just looks at me, and I was like I was laughing. I'm like trying to pee, and I'm just like giddy on this birth high, and he's like, I cannot believe this.
Like how different it is.
Yes. Yeah. He was like, you're laughing right now.
Night and day.
He's like, I'm so glad we did this. I'm so glad that we did this because it was incredible and it was amazing and you were fine, you know, and yeah, and it was awesome. And so it was such a healing experience, I think, for him too, because after Sam's, it was scary. I almost passed out. I was like yellow. Right. I was such a mess. And this time I'm holding my new baby, and she's got like this, she had so much vernix on her body. Like she was covered in it.
And what's vernix for people who aren't?
So vernix is like this stuff that protects the baby in the womb. And so as you get closer to your due date, it'll start to like kind of wear off.
Yeah. It's like that like whitish coating that's on babies, like when they're fresh, like when they like just came out.
And it does soak in. So don't rub it off, and don't tell someone to like go clean the baby up, because that's super, super good for their skin to let it rub in. And hers was thick. It was like real thick.
She like cottage cheese.
Yeah, it was. Well, and it was, I didn't mention, it was the night before my birthday that I had her. So I had her on June 29th at 9:15 p.m. and my birthday is June 30th. So it was my birthday cake frosting baby. But I just let it soak in, and it totally soaked in.
Yeah,
I mean,
it was
yeah. So you'll see in the pictures, like, she is covered in cheese. Covered in cheese. But she breastfed right away, and everything was really great, and it was just incredible. Like, the midwives did the exam right on my bed, so I'm just sitting here watching them check my baby. Just
hanging out.
And, you know, do all the things, and it was so awesome. It was just so calming. And I was surrounded by women. I think there was like 8 women there, literally, and then my husband and my son.
Great.
So it was, because they do call in another midwife. They always have 2 midwives for when the mom is about to have a baby. So that there's a midwife for the mom and a midwife for the baby, so that they don't have to divide their attention. And so there was an extra midwife there on top of the one that was training. So there's so many women. But it was just very calm and wonderful. And they tucked me into bed, and I went to sleep with my baby and my husband and my son just laying next to me. And I was just like, is this real?
This is how it can be, no?
Like, this is real life right now. I just couldn't, it was like a dream, seriously. And the midwives came to my house the next day, and then at 3 days postpartum, and then 2 weeks postpartum, and then at 6 weeks postpartum, I went to them and did our last appointment. And it was just crazy. Like, it was so cool that they came to me and I didn't have to go out.
Right, when you're fresh baby, like, I remember going out with, like, teeny tiny babies, like, at the point where, like, you know, it was like 2 or 3 days after we'd been out of the hospital, and I was still like riding in the back seat with them because I was still nervous about it. So to not have to leave your house, like, man.
Yeah. And I had like a tiny tear that my midwife was like, it'll heal together, but you have to keep your legs closed. She calls it the James Bond girl experience, where like, she literally says, be like Pussy Galore, because that's her name in James Bond. And I'm like, Ingrid, oh my gosh, I can't with you. But it's like, you know, when they get out of the car, they don't wear underwear, so they have to keep their legs closed when they get in and out. And that's what you have to do. You have to keep your legs closed so that this heals. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So like, not having to get in the car was like a huge thing. So yeah, it was incredible all around. I did get engorgement like super bad, whereas my midwife was like, you look like Dolly Parton. Like, thanks. I know. I can't fit into any shirts, and I'm dying. But we'll talk about that.
We'll get there later.
Okay, so now that I'm done, sorry. That was a long
and our
one.
Camera's working again.
Yeah, we're back.
My bad. So, our last birth story, I say our because, like, Nicole was there with me, right? Like, she was my photographer.
Yeah.
So this is my third and final child for the moment. And
Not done. Hashtag not done.
Hashtag I'm not really sure. Like, I don't know that I'll like birth another baby because this was like low key traumatic, like small t trauma. And but so it's my last baby. I'm with the midwives again because like my insurance was the same as it was with my son, but the midwives are now accepted by this insurance.
Yes.
And they weren't before. So I was like, yes, like game on, let's go. Like, gonna go see the midwives. It's gonna be great. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing the midwives, and I think I'm like, I don't know, like 16-ish weeks in, and they're like, hey, we're concerned about your blood pressure. And I was like, dang it, like last time I made it to like 30 some weeks before we were worried about this, and now we're like at 16, and I'm like, dang it. And I'm like really upset about this because I know that this means I'm probably going to switch to an OB. And I'm like, okay, if I'm going to have to switch, I should probably do it sooner than rather than later so that I can create this relationship with an OB and like get to know them and make sure that they know like where I'm at with things.
Right.
And I kind of hated my OB at first. I love her now. She's a phenomenal woman. But when I first went in, she had like the come to Jesus talk with me and was like, listen, like this could be really serious, like XYZ. And like, I was upset about it probably because I was emotional about having to switch providers as it was. But also like, I'm a third-time mom. Like, I've heard a lot of these things. I do a lot of research. I knew a lot of these things. And I didn't want to come into every appointment and hear, like, you know, this could be really bad. Like, you guys could, like, this could cause lifelong injuries. Like, blah, 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 blah. Like, I didn't want to come into every appointment and have that, like, doom and gloom feel. Like, you were saying, when you went to your midwife's appointments, you were like, oh, I'm so excited to go. Yeah. And I don't need to have that feeling, but I don't want to be, like, upset that I have an appointment and like not wanting to go to set appointments. And so my nurse, the nurse for my OB, like was actually a friend of mine. And so I left that appointment where she was like kind of doom and gloom. And I posted on Facebook and I was like, who knows of some OBs that take GHC because I'm switching again. Right. And this is similar to that last time where I was like, I'm not putting up with it. I'm just not. No. Like, I'm a new doctor. Like, I'm allowed to do this. And she calls me and she said, my nurse friend calls me. She said, hey, I saw your post on Facebook. And I was like, dang it. Like, I thought I could be like under the radar, low key. And she's like, what's going on? But I'm really glad that she did, that she called me and had this conversation. And so she gave me like, how do I say it? Like, she gave me like that little bit of like backup to be like, it's okay to tell doc that like this was not a good appointment and you do not want appointments to go like this. And I do know that, but I just, rather than trying to face the problem, I was like, I'm just going to put it away.
And then get a new one.
And so I am glad that I did end up facing it. And so she actually was like, okay, I'll talk to the doc for you. I'll let her kind of know where you're at and how you're feeling. And she goes, and I would suggest calling her tomorrow and talking to her. So I call her, we have a conversation. She said, hey, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to be so doom and gloom. And she's like, I will probably never talk about any of these things again. She goes, but I'm not sure what you have been told and what you haven't been told at this point. And I want to make sure we cover all the bases. So at that point, I've calmed down. I'm a little bit more rational. And I'm like, okay. And so I tell her, you know, I don't want a C-section. I don't want to be poked and prodded. I tell her all these things I don't want, that I'm used to the midwives. I prefer like that more gentle, non-invasive style. Like, that's what I want to stick with. And she's like, okay. And so then I'm feeling like better about things. And I'm like, okay, this will work. So as pregnancy goes on, my blood pressure is doing weird things. My protein urine is doing weird things. Like, my kidney and liver values are doing weird things. And so they're like, hey, we're going to send you to the maternal and fetal medicine docs at the hospital. And so like, I'm no longer with my OB. I'm with like these big hospital people. And like, that was kind of intense. But I was like, okay, like, we're just going to put on like the learner hat and I'm going to be like, okay, I'm going to learn everything I can and take in all the information and just try to think of this as like, okay, we're preparing, right? We're preparing for all of it. Like, what are the things I need to know? What are the concerns? So I went in like with a notebook full of questions to ask them and was like, okay, like, hit me on this, and this. So then when I walked out, I didn't feel so discouraged, but more empowered about like, okay, this is what I do know. This is what I can control. These are the things I can do.
You're so good at that. Like,
sometimes.
And like taking it on and being like, you know what? I'm going to take this on.
I will say though, like, usually like the first like 6 hours after a thing, I'm like, nope, the world is ending. This is terrible. Count me out. I'm done. Like, I'm tapping out of life. And then after after that, I'm like, okay, I guess this is going to happen whether or not I want it to. So let's go. Right. And so that is definitely my style. Like for 6 hours, I'm like panicking. And then I'm like, all right, let's go. I'm just kidding. I got this. And I'm definitely good, like, fake it till you make it.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that's definitely my, like, motto in life. Yeah. So if that's you, too, like, I see you. So, you know, at this moment, you know, the maternal medicine docs and, like, my OB are, you know, coming up with a game plan. So we're bumping up to extra monitoring. We're bumping up to non-stress tests, or sometimes called NSTs, and fluid checks where, like, I'm getting an ultrasound every week to check just my fluid levels. And then I'm also doing a growth ultrasound every 4 weeks to make sure. So the amount of ultrasounds I had with this baby, like, I saw him all the time. And he was always flipping. And so then I was paranoid, like, oh, great, now I'm going to have a breech baby too. Yeah. And so during one of our growth ultrasounds, they look at his heart and something doesn't look right. And I'm like, damn it. Gosh. This is terrible. Like, worst pregnancy ever. Right. So I have to go to the American Family Children's Hospital, which I'm so glad, like, we have in our backyard because, like, they are phenomenal. Mm-hmm. And we do a in utero echo to see what's going on with his heart. And again, I'm like, okay, like, now we're going to learn all the information. Like, how bad is this going to be? Like, what type of heart issues are we going to have? And it's just like trying to face like one problem at a time. But really, his pregnancy was a mess. Like, I felt like it was just like thing after thing after thing. And at the time, I have 2 children at home. Right. You know, no big deal. It's fine.
No big deal.
My oldest has just started school. And my youngest is home all the time with me. Yeah. I'm also back to working because I quit working for a while. That's right. So then I was working again. I was working at a gym. And so I was up at 4 a.m. to be at the gym by like 4:30. And then I would like work until noon or whenever my daughter got done with school. And so like I was still working, trying to balance all that. So it was crazy. But like we made the best of it. And there was a point where I told my job, like, hey, I've got to step back. I've got to cut down to halftime.
It was a lot of stress, too.
Yeah, there was just a lot going on. Yeah. And it was a really great job. I loved working it. And I like, toot my own horn real quick. Like, I was good at it. I'm not going to lie. I was good. I was. You were. And, but I think, again, like, kind of, we talked about, we're going to talk about boundaries next time. Yes. Like, that was a boundary I needed to set for me. Mm-hmm. And I have a real problem with feeling like I'm disappointing people. Yeah. And, like, that's definitely, like, an internal issue that, like, I hate the feeling of disappointing people. And even if they are not actually disappointed, I feel like I'm disappointing them.
Well, and you feel so worried about like having to tell them I have to step back.
Yeah. Well, and then I know like,
you could do it, but you don't have to.
And that, you know, I had one of the gals one of our members told me this. She goes, Alesha, you can do this, but you don't have to do this. And like it totally like flipped it in my head for me that like, yeah, that's right. Like I'm making this choice. Mm-hmm. This is an empowering choice to set this boundary, to know what my limits are for me and my family and my children and this unborn child here. Yeah. That like I need to step back. I need to sleep. And I was really nauseous, like not to your level, but like for me it was a lot. Yeah. And like with all the other stuff going on, like I just couldn't do it on my plate anymore. Yeah. So like if your boundaries change during pregnancy or you need to put stricter boundaries in, like I want you to know, like, do it. Like, be empowered to do that. Mm-hmm. And, like, I've got your back. Like, you've just messaged me. We will talk about it.
And you don't have to be the same as you were with the last child during your pregnancy. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be the same you were before you got pregnant. You don't have to be the same as you were last month before you got new information and things changed. Exactly. You are okay. It's okay to make changes in your life. It's okay to be a different person sometimes. Mm-hmm. You know, it's okay.
Yeah, well, and
it's okay to be different.
All the different circumstances that come into life, like all of those things can change where you're at, and like that's okay. Yeah, it is okay to say I need to take a step back from this. It is okay to be like, hey, I can't lead this Girl Scout troop anymore because there's too much going on in my life. Right, like somebody will step in. So make those choices if you need to. Yeah. Sorry, I got on a tangent there.
It was a good tangent.
It was important.
It was important.
So we're doing all these like monitoring and things. We're just kind of keeping an eye on it.
How was your anxiety at this point?
It was terrible. Yeah. It was terrible.
I feel like you would be able to see the baby more, but it's more
like,
scary.
After it was done, like after the test was done, I would feel better. Yeah. But like going in, I was like, how's this going to go? Yeah. Is this going to be okay? Like what's going to happen? But like afterwards, I'd be like, okay, we're good for another week. We're good for another 4 days. Like whatever it was, right? So if I could, I literally tried to take it like one appointment at a time and like not worry about it until the day of.
Right.
But so after one appointment, we had like a blood pressure test, and I think it was like maybe like 30-ish weeks. And my OB at the time goes, "Hey, I just want you to start mentally preparing that you having a baby at 34 weeks is a very real possibility." And I was like, oh shit, okay. And so like I remember like we're trying to like redo my kids' room at the time because we're moving rooms around and they're getting bunk beds. And my dad's like, "Well, you should have planned for this." I said, "I didn't know I was gonna go into labor at 34 weeks. I didn't know. Like I didn't know anything, right?" I remember telling Nicole like all I wanted was to set up a nursery. Didn't do that either. Like
yeah, you were like, third kid, gonna have a nursery.
I'm gonna get it together. I've got my life together. I know what I'm doing.
I got time. I got this.
Yeah, dropped the ball on that one. So I'm at like maybe 3-4 weeks later. Yeah, it was 4 weeks later. It was right on 30 weeks that she had said that the first time.
Yeah,
I'm in for an ST and a blood pressure check, and they're like, "Hey, your blood pressure's like kind of a lot high." And I was like, "Oh, great." And so they start me on a blood pressure medicine, and she's like, "Okay, now that you've officially been started on a blood pressure medicine, like we will take you at 38 weeks. Like we're not pushing it any further than that point." And I'm like, "Okay, I can do 38 weeks. Like that's still good." Mm-hmm. And then I go home and I end up with a headache. And if anybody has had pre-eclampsia before, headaches are like a big sign. Like they're like, watch for headaches and like abdominal pain, blurry vision, swelling, and there's one other thing, nausea maybe. Yeah. I don't know, one other thing I can't think of. And I was like, oh dang, like I got a headache. But I get headaches a lot. So I was like, that's okay. I'm going to take some Tylenol. I'm going to take some CBD. I'm going to take a nap, drink some water, right? Like all the things, all the things that I think I should be doing for this headache. I wake up, I still have this headache, and I'm like, dang, this is not good. Like, I know this is not good.
And is this when you went in?
Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, we're going to go into triage and just like hang out for a minute, have them monitor the baby and me, see what's going on. At this point, I think I am coming home. I think I'm just going to like pop in and they're going to monitor me. Like I dropped my kids off at my sister's house. Yeah. I didn't even get out of the van to say goodbye. Like I was just like, see you later. Cause like I was convinced I was coming home.
Right.
I was supposed to work the following day. I'm like messaging people as my husband's driving to the hospital. Like, hey girl, could you maybe cover my shift tomorrow? Like, I don't know if I'm going to be in. I'll keep you updated. Like, I think I'm still going to work.
Right. So how many weeks are you at this point?
34 and 2.
Okay.
I'm 34 and 2.
Where we are, though.
And so I'm like, I'm not going into labor today. Like, it's not happening.
Well, and I remember you text me when you were in the hospital, and I was having a game night with friends, and I was drinking wine.
And you're like, I probably should stop drinking.
I was like,
and I think I was like, no, you're fine. You can probably drink that. Because again, I am so convinced.
I wasn't on call yet, so I was like, I can drink.
Right. Yeah. I'm so convinced I'm going home. We didn't pack a bag.
No.
I don't have a car seat. Nothing. And not because like we're negligent parents, but because like I was like, I got at least headache. 3 or 4 weeks left. It's fine.
Yeah.
And so we get in. They're like, okay, this is October 30th. Mm-hmm. And they're like, okay, well, we're going to admit you and keep you overnight. And I was like, oh, shit. That's not good. Like I know at this point, right? After she tells me that, then I'm probably not going home. Because like my blood pressure's not getting any better. They're running blood work. The numbers look worse than they did like 2-3 days ago. And so I'm like, yeah, we're not going home.
And at this point, what your doctor's saying is at 34 weeks, you might be having a baby. Right. You're like,
oh yeah, like that's running through my head. I'm like, oh shit, here we go. Okay. So the next morning we start induction, and I mean, if anybody's had a baby early, most of the time your body is not really ready to like throw your baby out because it's like, nah, girl, we got 6 more weeks. So induction takes kind of a long time because my body's just like not here for it. Like it's like, no, we're not doing this. No. And my doc is like, yeah, we're definitely doing this. So my mom is there, my sister is there, my husband is there. Nicole shows up because she's like, nope, I'm just going to be there, right? Mm-hmm. And like, thank God Nicole's there because she actually knows our nurse because she's worked with her several times and it's like come to know her outside of the hospital. So I have like 2 great ladies with me and like we're like doing everything, right? So we should
also say that this is Halloween now.
Yes, it is Halloween day. Yes. It is October 31st. So we're the next day.
So I remember you like were looking out at the ring on your sister's like ring eye thing, and you're like, "Oh, look at trick or treaters."
Yeah, so she's got the ring doorbell, and so I miss my kids trick or treating. Yeah. My sister and her husband taken, like thank God for them. They take the kids trick or treating with the extended family, and so they stand in front of the ring doorbell so I can see them like dressed up and like going.
I think mine was.
Yeah, and then Nicole's kids came by, so we're like able to see what's going on. And I'm talking about my nurses about like, oh, what are your kids going to be for Halloween? Because I'm just like hanging out at this point, like waiting for baby to come.
Right. It was a lot of waiting. Yep.
But I was on Pitocin and magnesium. And if anybody's familiar with mag, it kind of cancels out your Pitocin. Like it slows things down. Mm-hmm. But when you are pre-eclamptic, you have to have it so that you don't end up being full on eclamptic and also having seizures. So like the magnesium is really important. And if you're on magnesium, you can't eat, you can't get up, you can't walk around. So, I mean, that's out the window at this point.
Have an epidural
right. So at that point, we were like, go ahead and throw that in there, see what happens.
Throw it in there.
Well, because we didn't know how long this was going to take. And so they were like, you really need to sleep, like get some rest. So we spend the night. Nicole spends the night. She sleeps in the waiting room somewhere. Like
Your mom kept talking to someone in the waiting room, and I'm like trying to sleep on this tiny little couch. And I'm like, Denise,
be quiet.
It was good.
And so the next morning, things are starting to pick up. And we're like, okay, like we're going to do this. And we're like still having to change positions though, because I'm not really like progressing a lot or very quickly, I guess. And I had a fantastic nurse who was all about like, let's get the peanut ball in here, like let's switch sides. And you know, my husband's over there like Googling ways to get into labor.
Too.
And like,
I think you spent most of the night Googling.
Honestly, I don't really remember. Like a lot of it feels like a blur.
I remember that because when I came in, you were like, I want to do the breast pump.
Yep. That was my husband's.
Yeah.
That was his idea. It was like nipple stimulation.
Yep.
So it was like, how do we go about that? And we're like, breast pump done. So we're asked for a breast pump.
I think the talk
Rebozo.
Yes.
We did Rebozo.
Well, and the hint of section was starting to
creep in. Like it was like being like low key suggested that like, hey, we might have to go to a section
because you're not progressing.
Right. And at this point, you know, I've had 2 vaginal births. Right. I am not having a C-section if I can help it at all. Right. I'm not in distress. My baby is not in distress. So I'm like, we're okay. Like I'm stable. Like things haven't progressed a ton with this preeclampsia. Like it's not good. Right. But like, we're not like on a time crunch here.
I just remember being so proud of you because I walked in and you like spent all night researching what to do because you were on Meg and had an epidural. So it's not like you can get up and walk around. I can't get up and walk around.
I can't labor in a tub. I can't stand. I can't bounce in a ball. I can't use a bar.
But you found ways to make it work. Yeah. And that is incredible. And I think it's a really teaching moment for other people that are in those situations to be like, hey,
even if you can't move, even if you can't sit, even if you can't sit up like on the edge of the bed, right? Like there are still things you can do. So
there are still things.
I would turn on my hands and knees, and we got a bed sheet to do a rebozo. And for those of you who don't know, rebozo kind of like, it's like a sling almost for your belly, and then the person stands above you and kind of just shimmies, right?
Like you're milking a cow.
Yeah, a little bit. And so it kind of just helps like get baby like down and like help kick those things in. So my husband is standing on the hospital bed doing the rebozo. Nicole gets up on the hospital bed doing the rebozo. And
I have never seen someone that has an epidural be on hands and knees like this. That was incredible. And you were holding onto the peanut ball.
Yep.
So you were, so
like my top half was supported. Yep. And like I still had enough like ability to move in my knees and stuff.
And I think that was a huge thing about having a supportive nurse who wanted this just as much as you did. Yeah. Where she was like, yes, let's do this.
She was like, yeah, I'll go talk to the doc about a breast pump. We could totally make this work. They bring me a breast pump down. She said, hey, I talked to the doc. She said, we could do this. But like, it's not like a free-for-all, right? But she had my back and she advocated for me. And so like knowing that I had her in my corner, I was so much like more confident in being able to like make a call and have like somebody who was gonna have my back. Yeah. And even my doc, like she was supportive. And later on, she told me that she got a lot of pressure from other docs on the floor. Like, you should just section her. You should just section her. And she was like, no, I think they can do this. Like, I think they can do this. And like, but if she hadn't held off, there was a lot of pressure from her peers to just kind of like move me through the system, if you will. So, and like I pumped out a little colostrum, and like my nurse made sure, like
she was like syringing
she syringed it up and saved it so we could give it to baby later on, and like, but like just those little things that like make a difference, and like.
Well, and I think if I remember it, you had to do like 5 minutes.
5 minutes, and then I had like rest for like 10 minutes or 20 minutes,
something like that. So it wasn't just constantly pumping; it was like, okay, 5 minutes on both.
Yeah, we did both sides.
Yep, and then you stop for 20 minutes,
right? Because it's something about like it could
do too much.
Too much, like, stimulation would kick things too quickly and, like...
Well, because you're already getting Pitocin, which is oxytocin, you know, so it's, like, just so much oxytocin.
Oh, and I should mention, like, I've had steroids at this point for his lungs, and so we needed to keep him in for 24 hours after I'd gotten that steroid injection, which I think is why they waited till the following day, that October 31st, to originally start, like, induction.
Yeah.
Because he was 34 weeks, his lungs weren't fully developed, and so that steroid is supposed to help them kind of get, like, a little bit of a leg up.
Yeah.
So we've had steroids at this point, magnesium at this point, Pitocin at this point. We've done so many things. I think they're giving me blood pressure meds through an IV, and I think it was labetalol, if I remember correctly, that they're giving me. So, like, we've got all the things going. So there's tons of wires. Like, I'm constantly getting tangled up.
Right.
But, again, I had plenty of support people there who could help move that stuff out of the way, help me get untangled, help me get into these positions. And finally, he makes his way down enough, and I am dilated enough that we're like, okay, like, I'm going to push this baby out. Like, I did this. Like, we made it. Like, I've been in the hospital for 3 days at this point.
Right.
And I was convinced for a short period that, like, I was going to have a C-section. And, like, I'm thinking to myself, man, I'm going to have this teeny tiny 34-week-old baby. I have 2 kids at home that I also need to take care of. And I'm going to have to go through abdominal surgery. Like,
right.
And I think sometimes people just, like, throw C-section around. Like, it's not a big deal.
It is.
But, like, it's major abdominal surgery. Like, you are cutting through muscle walls. I was going to say muscular walls. I mean, they're also muscular.
Yeah.
You're cutting through those walls. Like, your body has to, like, heal that up.
Gosh,
and then also all the other postpartum things that are happening.
Right.
And, like, I was like, no, we can't do this.
And
like, I'm
also,
not doing it.
a lot of people don't know if you have a C-section, you still bleed vaginally, just so you know.
Right,
Because your placenta is still shedding
There's still things happening in that.
Yeah, there's still
So it's not like it's just done. Like, it's surgery.
It's a lot.
But I remember making it to that point, and I remember how excited, like, Nicole is for me, and my nurse is for me, and my OB is for me, that, like, you did this, like, we made it to the end. And, like, I always credit my nurse for this, and she's like, no, that was you. And I'm like, yeah, but it was you, because I knew you were in my corner.
Right.
And, like, without you being there, I'm not sure I could have stood as tall and for as long as I did, because I was so supported by her in my choices, and, like, she was giving us ideas, and she was like helping us rotate and doing all of these things.
She's amazing.
Yeah, she's phenomenal. So shout out to my OB nurses out there. So he comes out where I start to push and stuff. He's 34 weeks, so he's fairly small.
So tiny.
Yeah, I don't remember how long I pushed for. I think it was like one push. Like
it was very fast.
Like once we started, because he was so little, like, but I remember in my head, I was like, oh my God, this is gonna be this teeny tiny little, like, chicken cutlet baby, right? Because, like, I just think I was, like, worst case scenario. He comes out and they put him on my chest, and the first thing I say is, oh my God, he's so big. Because, like, he was like 5.5 pounds.
He was big for a 34
which is a good size for that baby. And so I remember just, like, in that moment, like, once he's out and, like, on my chest, like just like that relief, like, okay, like, you're here, I'm still okay, like, we're okay. They weigh him, and I'm like, 5.5 pounds, look at you, little fatty. Like,
and he, like, grabbed your bra and
immediately
would not let you go, because they let you have him for, like, a minute or two,
not very long,
maybe a minute for the cord, maybe, and then they took him away. But he was like, no, my mom.
Right. And then it was crazy, because I had all the OB staff in there, and, like, I don't really remember this, but looking back at photos, I'm like, wow, there's like 14 NICU doctors and nurses in the background, like, ready to go. And so they take him, like, probably within 5 minutes. 10 minutes. Like, it wasn't very long.
They gave him back to you for a little bit to say bye. Yeah. And then they headed upstairs.
And then I didn't see him again until, like, probably, like, midnight. It was late. It was really late. Yep. And I was feeling terrible, because the mag makes you feel really awful.
Yes.
And just kind of drains you. And I've also just given birth, so, there's that.
The shakes that, I remember the shakes.
My shakes were terrible. Yeah. So if you don't know, after you have a baby, sometimes, I think most people, I mean, Nicole's been at far more births than I have, so I'm a referencer. After they give birth and, like, the placenta and things are starting to, like, come down, your body has so much, is it, like, the adrenaline? It's
like the adrenaline, yeah. A lot of people get it before they have a baby, so, like, when they're in transition, all of a sudden they'll start shaking. Yeah. And my sister had it with with an epidural. That's how we knew she was, like, complete. Yeah. She would start shaking. But you can also get them after.
I think with all my babies, they were after. And, like, I'm talking like the shakes are so hard, my teeth are like clicking together. And I'm like telling Nicole, like, I'm freezing. I'm so cold. And like, I am just shivering. Yeah. Nicole gets me warm blankets. She's like,
I think I just like laid on you a little bit, like held you.
It's okay, right? Because my husband is now with my baby.
Right.
Because they have taken him up to the NICU.
And me and your sister just switched. Yep. So I went with Tito at first with the baby, and then me and your sister switched. So that someone was with you and someone was with Tito.
I knew like somebody had the baby and Tito, because I'm sure for him, like, that's got to be a mess, right? Like, you have this teeny tiny baby in front of you, but you also have your wife down in like a different floor entirely, and you're like, I hope that's all going well, because I'm up here.
And especially with you having hemorrhaged with the first baby, like, that's on your mind, you know? And yeah, with the second baby, they were like putting him on oxygen and stuff right away. And so it was kind of like, stand back, get out of the way, you know? So it was a little scary up there.
It's a lot faster. Because, I mean, there's just so many more medical people stepping in versus like with Lincoln, right? Like, he was totally fine, like full term. He was in and out and like spent the next hour on my chest and didn't move. And this was like not the case for that. So it was a completely different situation on the outside. And then even after they took him up, like, my husband is still having to advocate about, like, things we do want done or don't want done. So, you know, I had mentioned earlier, like, we don't do Hep B and we don't do the eye ointment. And so he's still up there. And then, like, you having to defend to these nurses, like, no, we're not doing the eye ointment, you know. And she's like, well, why aren't you doing it? And he's, you know, got to, like, defend his position as he's also, like, worried about his baby. And I totally get that it's a standard procedure and that there are benefits for it. And it may be the right choice for your family. But it just wasn't for us. It wasn't something we wanted to do. And again, I looked into it. It wasn't like a choice I just made blindly.
And yes, we did a lot of research on different things. I mean, me and you both did that. But it being with our husbands, the only people we've ever been with since we were kids, like, you know, it was a choice that was easy for us to make with that.
Exactly. And so, you know, just again, like we had mentioned previously, like talking to your partners about like what your wishes are for your baby together, because things like that happen, right? Things where you are separated from your baby and your partner is the only other person that's with them and can advocate for them, because your baby can't advocate for themselves. So somebody's got to do it. And otherwise it falls to the standard care, which is great. It's not bad, but it may not be what you want. And like the amount of times we had people ask us if we wanted a circumcision when we had clearly said no and it was already in our chart. And I was also like, dude, he was born 6 weeks early and could barely breathe. Like, let's not jump into things. And if circumcision is for you, again, great. Like, it wasn't something that was super important to us, and especially considering he had breathing issues and stuff. I was like, we don't need to put him through any more trauma. Like, I don't need to go through any more trauma.
Oh my goodness.
And like the NICU stay was a whole other thing, and we'll have to cover that.
We need to do a podcast on just NICU,
because like that was chaotic, and it was terrible. Like, I can remember just sitting in the recovering room after they'd moved us floors and like just crying because like my baby wasn't in the room with me. And I've had 2, you know, normal births before this where the baby's been in room with me and like been able to snuggle them whenever I want. And like the mag is so bad at this point that I can't get out of bed until 24 hours after the mag has been off, and I can't even eat till 24 hours.
It's so terrible.
So one of my best friends was like, okay, girl, you call me when your time is up. You tell me what you want. I said, I want a large chocolate shake from Culver's. And if you're not from the Midwest, you may not be familiar with Culver's. But like, it's custard, not ice cream. And it's just like, it's like heaven in a cup. Smooth. It's so delightful. And like, that's all I wanted.
Not an ad.
Right, not an ad. But I mean,
it could be.
But I mean,
Culver's,
hashtag sponsor. But like, that's all I wanted, right? So she comes with a large chocolate shake, like literally minutes after my time is up. That was perfect. And I was just like so happy to have something.
Right.
And I was like starving because like, for me, after I give birth, I'm so hungry. Like, I'm ravenous.
Yeah.
Like, give me all the
you didn't eat that entire time, and then you just, like, pushed a human out.
From October 30th, dinner, to November 2nd.
Oh, my God.
I know.
That's insane.
Like, in, like, about 3 o'clock.
Gross.
So, like, that's how long. And so, like, I had chicken broth, and I had Jell-O, and popsicles, and even that was limited. I could only have, like, 50 mils, like, every 30 minutes or something. So my nurse... she's pouring like half the juice into a cup and is like, this is what you can drink, right? Like, and they're tiny sips.
Right.
Ice chips, I can have like a half a cup of ice chips. Like, it was terrible. And so like, that's a long time to be without nutrition.
Right.
And
oh my gosh.
And so like, that's all I wanted after that was just like, I was just ravenous. I like ordered all the food.
Yes.
But that's pretty much Lucas in a nutshell. I mean, other than his NICU stay, which is a whole
Yeah.
That's a whole episode.
Yeah, for sure. We need to talk more about that and just all the emotions you go through.
Oh, yeah.
All the education you have to do so that you can keep up with the doctors. And that's definitely a whole other
and like
podcast.
just how different it was, like having 2 normal births, right? And like going home with baby, and then like this time like going home
like
with no
frozen.
baby.
Time was frozen.
It was so bizarre. Like life kept going on like outside of our family, but like for me it was still like frozen in that moment.
I remember being so in awe of you though, because like I was like, did you just have a baby? Like you were just like back to normal mom mode.
That's because like 6 days after that was one of the primary elections, and so I had to go vote. I had priorities, so I went to the NICU
pre-COVID.
Right, pre-COVID. I had a morning NICU like slot that I would go to, and then my girlfriend, my OB nurse friend, the one from earlier, she watched my kids so that I could go to the NICU, came home, got them, we did lunch, I went and voted, went home, hung out with them for a little bit.
And I was just like,
my husband came home, we went back to the NICU.
Yeah, I was a hot mess. I was in bed for like 3 days after my second. You always made things look so easy though.
It's a fake it till you make it.
Seriously, because we became friends again when Lincoln was like 4 months old.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a second kid yet, but she always you just always wrapped your baby to you and just like did life. And I was like, man, she makes having a second baby look so easy. Like she was such a badass. And then I'm over here having a second kid and I'm a hot mess. Like dumpster fire, seriously. I also had like extreme postpartum anxiety.
Like very different.
I was terrified to get in the car with my kids. I couldn't bring them anywhere. And you were just like, strap that baby in. Let's go. It was so normal for you.
Yeah, but again, I think that's just how I roll, right? Like the first 6 hours, I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be a NICU baby. This is going to be terrible. Oh my God. And then after that, I'm like, all right, let's learn all the things.
And
I'm going to change his diaper. I can change his monitors.
Yes.
Like I knew how to silence them and turn them off and do all the things. And
then I would have a birth and I'd be like, hey, I'm coming to visit you.
Right. She'd pop into the NICU. I was hanging out in the hospital anyways.
You're in your robe. You're just like wearing a robe.
I lived in my robe and leggings for like the entire time.
Though, because then you can nurse.
Yeah, you can easily nurse. I could pop it open and do skin to skin super easily, and like if somebody did come in, I could kind of
many things we need to talk about in that episode.
So many NICU
Bring a robe. There you go.
It's clutch.
Well, we talked a lot in this episode.
Lot of things.
And we just really wanted to wrap up the birth story so we could get into other things. So if you need to listen to it in 2 parts, that's totally fine.
Or if birth stories aren't your thing, like that's
just
cool
fast
too.
Forward, yeah. But the next episode, so episode 4. Wow. That seems like crazy. So the next episode we are going to do on boundaries, which is going to be...
It'll probably be like, let's be honest, like there will probably be several episodes on boundaries.
Oh, yeah.
But this will just be the first piece.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so many boundaries to talk about. Boundaries with your family, boundaries with your friends, boundaries with yourself.
Boundaries with partners, boundaries with your children.
Boundaries with work.
Right. So...
There's so many things to talk about. So I'm sure we'll do many podcasts on it, but it'll be a good way to ease into talking
stuff
about more
that's
stuff.
not necessarily birth.
Yeah, because now that we got those out,
we gotta expand, right?
All right. Well, thank you for listening or watching us if
wherever
you're on YouTube.
At, yeah.
Yes.
Make sure you subscribe.
Yes.
Hit the like button, set your alarms on YouTube if that's your thing. All the stuff so you can stay up to date with us. And as always, you can reach out to us via email or Instagram or Facebook, and we've got all of that. If you've got ideas or questions or feedback, we'd love to hear from you.
Yes, for sure. And please leave a review. That always helps.
Yeah.
More people find us, and we love to read them. So thank you so much for listening to us. Bye.
Bye.